Good morning. This is Eric Guy at Center for Victory. We're here with our webinar, our first webinar for the new year on managing millennials. With me is our executive consultant, Zack Del Turco. We're going to get started. We're going to walk you through just some things that we typically use as best practice for our clients, along with a story that Zack has. Him being a millennial and all. But we're going to get started here with y'all, and people will continue to come in. One of the things that you all know are happening, that we've had discussions with many of you, if you're a client, about the influx of millennials in the workplace seems to be a hot topic. By the end of this year, what stats say is more than 51% of the workplace will be millennials, so we have to begin to understand how we manage them, how we even bring them in, how we go after them and hire them, attract them. Once you get them, how do you keep them? So the management of it, I would say that is a big issue for many of the people that we work with. You know, that typical age range, depending on what you look at, what research you look at, we're typically looking at anywhere from 22 years to 37 years old. Regardless of that, it's a big issue. And we're going to start with a story from Zack, who's here. He's a consultant that's been with us not too long, but how we got him was a great story. So I'll shut up and let Zack talk about this whole idea of going from miserable to miraculous. So,
well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Zack Del Turco. I've been with the company a little over a year, and I absolutely love what I do. I wake up every single day. I like to say it like this: I can't believe that I get to do what I do. I wake up and say, my gosh, I'm blessed, and I go to bed kicking and screaming because I just love what I do. And then wouldn't it be nice to have your employees or even yourself to have that kind of mindset or mentality around what you do on a daily and weekly basis? But here's what was happening in my at my previous job. I was just having some really hard times with the management, and my manager, I have a great relationship with him still to this day. But what was happening is my personality, I'm very big picture, very strategic, very proactive. I like my thumbprint on things. I'm very people oriented. I kind of like 5 to 7 things going on at once, but sometimes I could do one thing at a time. And I'm horrible with the details. And I know that about myself. And one thing with my profile is I do not like to be micromanaged. That's the worst thing that you could do for somebody that has a profile like myself. And that's what you're looking at, is that D drive, a little bit of the A as well. But I hated to be micromanaged. And my boss at the time, he was one of his highest drives was his D drive, which is the way you need information is the way you give information. He needed a ton of information to make a decision. Nothing wrong with that, but that wasn't how I was wired. But when he would be asking me questions and following up, it would come across as he was micromanaging me or he did not trust me. So I was having a really hard time, and there was that tension of, okay, do I stay because I believe in what the organization's doing, or is it time for me to move on? And I was in a mastermind group, L3 Leadership, Doug Smith, with Eric, and Eric went over my Predictive Index results, and I was blown away by the assessment. I'm like, man, how can somebody know me within 6 minutes of taking the assessment? And Eric sat me down and he said, I'm not trying to poach you, but you have a really good profile for an executive consultant here within my company. And if ever you would like to go be a part of my organization and leave the one you're currently at, I want you to know my door is always open. Well, guess what happened? A couple months later, I call Eric up and I say, hey, Eric, I just want to let you know I resigned in my job. I gave him a couple months and I'm moving on. So I went from being miserable to a place of, man, I can't believe I get to do what I get to do. But the reality is I wasn't confident in making that next step, because here's the truth. I had a skinny resume. I had no experience in this field of work. But Eric sat me down and he says, I know for a fact you're the right fit for the right role. Behaviorally, you're the right fit. Cognitively, we're still trying to figure that one out.
You're right fit for that.
Yeah. Cognitively, culture, that's our values index. Do my values align with the company's values? Yes. And then also the team dynamics. I was a great fit for this organization.
Yes, you were. And that's, that's a great story. I'm always looking for, that opportunity with people coming aboard, and you always have to keep your eyes open to know what you want. But that's where, for us internally, that's where that job assessment came in. The nice thing about when Zack came in, he got us connected with another millennial, even younger than you, and she's the D drive we need to manage everything here in the office. And it was nice because of his experience, then we got her, and both of them are doing extremely well at this point. The work environment pressures that we talk about, but that I want you to understand when you're looking at bringing in this new workforce. And here's the deal, and this is kind of a true story. I think I was going to hold off and do this later, but I might as well throw it in there right now. I actually have a gentleman, he's a CEO. He's actually having a different kind of problem. He's not having the issues with his millennials. He's having the issue of keeping his older generation motivated and engaged. And part of it is just the same thing that we're going to go through today with you. Do they fit in the right job? So Zack didn't necessarily have all the skill and experience to be an executive consultant. And initially he questioned that until I said, hey, look, you're just a natural fit for this. Here's how you fit, to show him the analytics. Here's how you fit behaviorally. Here's how you fit cognitively. And I know someone who's just like that, who's done well, which is me. All right. We have very similar profiles. And we have some others on the team that match that same profile. So behaviorally, that's good. The manager impact, I cannot stress that enough. I know we had a call yesterday from a manager saying, hey, look, should I put all my direct managers in this webinar with you so they can understand the power of the PI and things of that nature? And I said, absolutely. Manager impact in that role is crucial in our work environments. So thinking about how, Zack told the story about how his manager, managed him. Now, fortunate for me, didn't manage him correctly. If he would have, you probably still would be there now. I mean, because you believe in what they do and things, and that's important. One of the things that Zack mentioned as well is culture. There's another analytic that we use to measure that. It's just values and what our values are. And we'll talk about that as we talk about practical application later. And ultimately the team dynamics. So know that this can either make or break these four things. If you're going to concentrate on anything, especially with the onboarding, make sure they fit the role, even if you have to wait. And then make sure that manager knows how to treat that person. We're going to give you some practical applications, some onboarding tips. So if you're taking notes, get ready to jot some notes down, and we'll tell you some of the things that we've done with our clients and that we've done internally. Did you have anything to add?
And I would just say, if you get 4 out of 4 of these right, people aren't going to be leaving your company. You're actually going to be attracting the kind of people that fit your culture and fit your workplace. But I will say this, if you get 2 of the 4 wrong, I guarantee you those people have their resumes out right now. 3 or 4 that are off within an individual, it's only going to be a matter of time before they exit your organization. But I really do want to focus on that manager impact, because it's so key, because that's who your employees or millennials or whomever is working with on a daily basis. So if those managers don't know how to manage their direct reports, chances are that you're going to have disengaged employees, and that's even worse than having somebody leave your organization. It's having somebody that's disengaged, because here's what happens. They come to work and they do just enough to get by. That's that discretionary effort that we'll probably talk about here in a little bit.
Okay. Attracting. So this is the interview guide. If you're familiar with the PI system and you don't know how to get in this, because there's been a lot of great changes. If you don't know, let us know. We can walk you through that. But most of you know. So this is just an interview guide, and what it does is it interviews wherever those gaps are. So you can see for us, the only gap that Zack really had a little bit was that cutback D. We definitely have enough D drive internally to compensate for that, but that's not a huge. Now, if it was a high D, then we'd be focusing on that in the interview. Don't want you to focus a whole lot on questions in the interview that you already know. And what I mean by that is wherever that person falls within that, you could see with the A, B, and C, they fall within that realm. Don't spend a lot of time in the interview asking questions that you probably already know. They're just wired like that. Spend time on the gaps. And, for this example with Zack, not a lot of gaps. I don't want to see a lot of gaps, because wherever there's a gap in, and this is where you want to get the direct supervisor typically involved in the interviews, because that direct supervisor needs to see this, because they will have to be that coach in that gap. So wherever that gap is, they're going to have to coach. And I don't know a lot of people that have a lot of extra time to coach to all those gaps that we typically see. I had a gentleman in here, actually a CEO of a company, a local company, that was in here the other day. He said, how much time should I spend with such and such? I'm really having a hard time with him. He's doing technical work. I need him to follow up. We looked at the job assessment, which is just the PI for the role. That's the behavior of the role, what you see in orange here. That job assessment was a high D. This person was a low D. And he said, well, how much time do I spend with him? I said, well, you can spend the time, but know that you're always probably going to have to spend that time. Is he ever going to be your best person? Maybe not. Can you keep him? It's up in the air, maybe with some good coaching. But if you had 10 of those, would that wear you out? And he said, he's wearing me out. And I said, well, okay. How engaged is he? And then it came out, well, actually, I heard. And what he heard was his resume's out. He's already going out and looking for. So, and it's not that this person's a bad person. He's just not the right fit for that role. So utilize this interview guide when you're bringing them in. The other thing to get used to is really in your job descriptions, in your job postings, to utilize that behavioral input from the job assessment right in the job posting itself, and get it as close to the top of that job posting as possible. Because if you know who you want to attract, then use the right bait in that job posting. And now we'll move to really the management of people. And I'll let you start talking again, Zack, here.
Yeah. So, going back to Eric's point with the job assessment, you always want to compare someone's PI profile to the job assessment profile. And a lot of our clients are saying, well, we just need to hire somebody because the job market's so wide open that, we need to hire the first person that comes walking through that door. And, we recommend, I don't know if that's your best bet, but if you have to do that, that's fine. But here's what you need to do. You need to put their profile against the job assessment profile. So when they come walking in the door day one, they know these are the gaps that I need to kind of push towards, because that's more of their adaptive state that they're going to have to flex. So we always say this, when it comes to working with people on a daily basis, there's two things that we talk about. You have the golden rule, which is we're all used to treat people the way you want to be treated. But there's something much greater than that. We call it the platinum rule. Treat people the way that they need. The key is need. And if you're a client of ours, you have the PI toolkit, go on page 6. It's that little binder. There's about 33 pages in there. Go to page 6 and go to motivating needs. If you're ever having trouble with some of your people, or you're having a hard time motivating them, go to page 6, because chances are you're not meeting the needs of your people. So slow down around that coaching, go to that page 6. How do I meet the needs of my people for maximum productivity and efficiency?
Okay, talking about management styles, when you look at the greatest predictor of your management style is always going to be that person's highest drive. So those of you that are managers, look to your highest drive. I know I was doing a little survey the other day for a group I'm a part of, and one of the questions was, okay, what's your leadership style? Well, that's easy for me to answer because most of the time it's just my PI. That's what we fall back on. And so you have to know how you need to lead, but you have to know what that person needs. But you also have to know, what your management style is. When we take a look at the different management styles, you have like a general pattern where it's more authoritative, where that's going to be that highest A. Sometimes that's great, that works. But for some people, that doesn't work. Some people that aren't as dominant or that are more collaborative in nature don't respond well to all that and shut down. We've seen this happen quite a bit in places. I've seen that actually happen a lot in transportation and in manufacturing, where the manager is extremely dominant, especially in manufacturing, because we have a lot of manufacturing clients, where it's really push, 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 and tell. There's no collaboration at all. But the people that they're managing are low on that factor, and it causes a lot of turnover. Or you could be more like Martin Luther King Jr., more persuasive. So that's the highest B drive. Again, there's no good or bad to any of these, just knowing your style. If you're very extroverted and you have a bunch of extroverts, it's a lot easier to manage Zack, because we can talk back and forth as long as we stop and listen to one another. So it's, it's a double-edged sword there. But somebody that needs more time to think, that's on the lower end of that B drive, might get overwhelmed with that really high B. Right? So we have to be careful with that. But again, going back to knowing your style as a manager and knowing who you're managing. C, more like a Steve Jobs, all about process or the experience. This is a person, if that's their management style, very process oriented, has a lot of processes and procedures in place. But just understand that, maybe if you're that high as C and low as B and you're a manager, you might understand all the processes, but maybe nobody else does. But if they do, that's great. But just to keep that in mind. And an anomaly, more structure, more rules. This is that really high D. Again, works well for other folks on the team that are high Ds most of the time, not all the time, because they could have a different rule book. And then that's really where you have two high Ds that don't agree. There's some friction there. But a high D managing a low D in Zack's situation ends up being a micromanager, and sometimes you end up losing your best person.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if I had the predictive index at my old job and understood that he's not being that kind of manager on purpose, that's just how he's wired, I think we would have had a better working relationship. So, I mean, even if you're not a client right now, like, use some type of analytics. I mean, we prefer the predictive index, but your people aren't behaving the way they are to kind of poke you and to get underneath your skin. That's just how they're wired. So having some type of understanding, that self-awareness about how you're wired, how they're wired, will really help you out in the long run in your working relationship.
And that's a good point. Because I always say this a lot when I do trainings. It's not, don't take it personal. Mm-hmm. We take so much personal in our relationships. A lot of times we don't mean to do it. I was sharing a story the other night with Tammy, and I were laughing because I had an old colleague, and every time I would say something to her, and I thought she walked on water. She was wonderful. She was probably the epitome of a great employee. However, she was, at that point in time, I was actually younger than you. We were reminiscing the other night. she was probably, I want to say 30 years older than me. I was probably 24 years old. And I would joke with her, and I thought it was funny. And she approached me one day and she said, "Hey, look, Ed, I don't think that's funny. Can you stop?" And I was devastated because I didn't know. I'm like, man, because it took her forever to tell me.
Yeah.
And I never knew. And I apologized profusely, but I wish I would have known earlier because I wouldn't have done it. But that's what happens a lot of times. I don't mean to do it, or we don't mean to do it, but this is where that greater level of awareness. And I think one of the things that you could take away today is helping people be authentic to themselves, but responsibly authentic to themselves, and create the awareness around, this is how we work. How can I back this off? How can I adapt? But this is the next piece here, the employee needs. And that's what Zack was referring to in page 6 of your toolkit with the motivating needs. Treat people the way they need to be treated for maximum productivity and efficiency. When you look at the greatest predictor of employee needs, you look to their highest drive. If I have somebody that's really high A, they need to have their thumbprint on things. They need to make an impact. And when they don't, they get grouchy, right? With somebody with a high B drive, that's just that face-to-face. It's going to be the greatest predictor of what they need. And they need time, time with that person, time with their manager. A lot of times we run into that where the manager's a low B and they've got a highest B employee, and they're like, "Hey, nuts, I can't even stand talking to them." High maintenance. Yes, they are. Yeah, that's true. But if you give them a little bit of face time, I think a lot of people think this is going to take forever and ever. But when people get in any relationship, it doesn't necessarily even be work. When people get what they need out of their environment, they stay, but they're connected and they're bonded, and they're not disgruntled, and they stay engaged. With that high C, give them time, right? Give them time away, right? This is big. I mean, get them away. This whole idea of these wide open workspaces, I don't think they work well for anybody, right? Although the high B, low C's think they work great, but they're just not productive. They look busy. But for the high C, I've never heard a high C go, "Oh, I love that layout. It's just wide open. Everybody's talking." I've never heard a high C go, "Yeah. We'll do that more." They're usually, you could tell them, they're usually off in the corner, focused on things, but give them time to think through things. Tell them about the change. And obviously with a high D, give them the details. Okay. And let them know, give them clarity, expectation of role. There's no better way to do any of this than with the analytics, and then putting that job assessment over their PI first thing when they come in for work.
Yeah. And can I just add one thing?
Sure.
To that? So when you're looking at the highest drive, some of you guys might be a little bit confused. When you're looking at your first graph, that's yourself. Your highest drive is going to be the one that's furthest from that midpoint. So when it comes to your employees, the ones that is furthest from the midpoint. So my B drive is my highest drive. So last month when I did the webinar, the first thing I did after the webinar, Eric was sitting outside. I said, "Eric, tell me, how did I do?" I needed that instant feedback. Another scenario is when I went to do my first training all by myself. Eric knew that I had a low D, and he knew that I would have a hard time getting all the details right.
Could potentially.
But what he did was he talked to my highest drive, my B drive. He said, "Zach, I want you to look good in front of people when you go to present." It was all about looking good. So that's a good scenario of motivating your people to their highest drive.
Yeah. And one of the ways that, when we do our onboarding, and I'm going to give you some tips on what we do as far as onboarding and what we recommend. This is one of the things that we would recommend for any manager and their subordinate to have day one. It's just this relationship guide. All of you have access to this through the PI system. If you do not know how to get it, please let me know. I know I was with a client the other day that was a new client, and I showed them this, and they're going, "Wow, this is incredible." and I would go over this. I mean, this is a lot of good stuff when you sit down for a person's review. What are the strengths that we have? What are the cautions? What are some tips? And are we aware of these? Sometimes we're aware of them. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we need to be more aware. And it's situational too. So we don't have to be aware of this when we're traveling together and we're not having big impact. We can have fun and just spitball ideas. But when we're focused in on a meeting, we have to be careful because of the situation. We just can't talk about anything. We have to be a little bit more focused. So this is one of the things I would say, put this in your onboarding piece. One of the other analytics that we use, and Zack has graciously put his values index on this. This is not part of the PI system. This is another assessment that we do. But one of the things that we talk about is how to motivate, right? And when we look at values, how do I motivate? And again, there's no good or bad, positive or negative here. It's just, what are the things that motivate somebody like Zack? Economics, a big motivator, political, which is his need to lead, and altruism, which is really high as well. And when I look at that, we have to incorporate that into his behavioral piece. So it's another set of data that we're using. And everybody here, of course, of how the culture is structured inside of our company at Center for Victory, everybody's really high in that altruistic piece. That's one of their 3 highest motivators, because typically what we found in the past is if that's not one of your 3rd highest, it's kind of hard to keep up because we're very service oriented. We want to help. It's just in which way Zack wants to do it. He wants to do it because he wants to lead, but he also wants to make an impact. And that when you look at economic, that's not just for the sake of having money, Zack. It ties into your altruism.
Yeah.
You're wanting to give back, and I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, and it's true. But here's another point to this: this is in the engagement of your people. We use this internally when we bring on new consultants. But this right here will also measure your culture. So if you have somebody that is all altruism with no economic, chances are you might be more in that nonprofit setting, or you might be more of somebody that is the person who's taking charge of projects to serve your community. So this right here is going to help you define your culture, and we actually use this as another hiring point in our process.
Mm-hmm. And what you want to be aware of, these are motivators. So once you get them, a lot of people said, okay, because we had tons and tons of questions put in before this, and a lot of the questions revolved around, how do I bring them on, I recruit them, I get them in. When you talk about motivators, so one of the things that we did at the end of the year with everybody that I did in their one-to-ones was talk about, okay, what do you want to make a big impact in? What are you searching for 2020? And that, goal relation and how it relates to your goals and things of that nature, but really making that connection for that person and getting interested in each one of our people here and what they want to accomplish. Okay, while we're on this, one of the other tips that I wanted to go over today was an onboarding checklist. So if you're ready, before we take some questions here, I wanted to go over some of the things that we do to give you an idea. So onboarding checklist, day 1, here are the things, and you can get this right out of the PI system. Okay, right out of the PI system. Day 1, we just take a binder or folder. And day 1, when we onboard the person, we put number 1, their behavioral report in there. Their behavioral report overlaid on the job assessment, which is their coaching guide. We print out their placard. We also print out their personal development chart, along with the manager scorecard. When we go over that manager scorecard, that's the first time we're creating a date for that person to go to review it again. And it's typically 3 months after or 90 days. I think a lot of times we struggle because we lose people. It's because we're not having that interaction with them frequently enough. If you're doing it once or twice every year, it's typically not frequent enough. It needs to happen at least every quarter, because a lot of times we forget. And so every 90 days, look at that manager scorecard. How are we doing? What can I do more for you? And it makes it more of a, hey, this is not everything you're doing bad, Zach. It's like, how can I help you develop? What are you looking for? Where are you struggling? Where do you think your biggest challenges are? And I think most people think that that takes forever, because I know when we sometimes in training, it's like, oh, I can't do that. But then they start doing it, and then the second, third, fourth times, after the first time, I would say the first time, it does take a little bit longer. It takes about an hour or so. And then after that, second, third, especially when it gets to third, fourth, fifth times, it's much more fluid. It goes a lot easier because you know what's going on. Both parties know what's going on, and it becomes just, dialogue that we have. But what happens there is it creates a bond, and it creates a connection to that. Hey, look, I'm invested in your success, and I want you to be successful just as much as you want to be successful. The other thing that we do include there is also the relationship guide with their direct report, the PI of their direct supervisor, and if you can, if it's available, if they're on a large enough team, we also look into those group analytics and team dynamics. Again, that's all in the basic subscription of your PI guide, but that's what we utilize day one. One of the other things that people have asked about is, other documents that we use internally. And one of the things that we use internally and that we've also created for some of our clients, and I have a picture of it here that you can see through the camera. It's just a 90-day passport. And what this is, it's not anything earth-shattering, but it just says, welcome to the company, what our core values are, our purpose. And then it just goes to day 1, day 2, day 3, week 1, week 2, week 3, and there's just a checklist in it. Okay, so one of the things that we expect people to do on day 3, explain Catalyst, which is our online PI resource page, and feel comfortable navigating. Check. Right? Do they, day 3, I just want them to send a PI assessment. Can they do that? It sounds simple, but this is giving expectations to people that most companies, I think that's where we falter in. Hey, look, what are the expectations? And, it can look just in different ways. Is there an onboarding process? We have little checklists, and then we have, obviously the onboarding process. What does it look like? Setting you up for success inside of the Predictive Index. So we have these documents that we go through that helps the manager be more objective in their onboarding of that person, but helps that person get more connected to anything. You have anything to add before we go into questions? I know we have questions to take.
Yeah, I would just say, slow down, take the time to lay the foundation. The foundation is all that you have, especially when you're onboarding millennials and newer people. Lay that foundation, lay the expectation. The best thing that Eric did for me was he compared my behavior to the job assessment to give me confidence that I needed to say, you know what, I know I can do this with the right coaching and the right help.
Yeah, so we have a ton of questions already that people have gone in. I don't that have sent us. I'm not even sure if we'll get to all of them. But if you do have questions, you can throw it in the chat there, and we'll take questions for about 10 to 15 minutes. Some of the questions that people have already sent us, all good, by the way. Thank you for sending those in. Those are always great, so we can prepare ahead of time and just not answer them off the cuff. Number 1 was tips on how to set expectations in a way that millennials will understand, and in turn understand the consequences if not followed. Let me just back up here. I think one of the biggest things that's helped us a lot and has helped some of our other clients, regardless of what industry they're in, if people, even new people, understand the why of that company. We could literally, there's tons and tons of assessments out there. There's a lot of good quality assessments out there. Obviously we're a little biased with the PI and the things that we use, but the bigger piece is our why. And when people understand the why and have purpose, and if you look at any of the information coming out about younger generations, and this is even with my own kids or who are right below you, Zach, I mean, they're having the discussion about purpose, about their why. And I know that because we had over New Year's, we had our vision day here, and there were tons of people here, all of them 30 or under. And that's what they were talking about. they were all having this, okay, why should I work? It's not just a paycheck anymore. They want to have significance. And if you look at the research is even showing us that people have an innate need or wiring to contribute to something larger than themselves for about 9 hours a day. And I know what people are doing that are listening to this. They're going like, well, man, if I could get like 2 hours of productive work out of somebody, that would be great. But when a person understands the why, right, there's much greater likelihood of them staying. Now, again, they have to be in the right role. They have to have a great manager. It has to be in the right culture, right team dynamics. That being said, when they can hook into the why, that's much better.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when they can understand the why and the big picture of here's why I do this, those days that are mundane that they want to go on Indeed and or wherever and start looking up other job postings, they don't. They're like, okay, this is why I do this. It gets them through those tough days. But again, going back to those 4 levels, don't forget those. Those are important. Expectations up front. I've seen a lot of our clients, what we've helped them with is just set expectations. I think people don't understand the consequences because they've never been, they may have been told the expectations just once and they don't review them.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of the things that we do every quarter, and you can back me up on this, is I go over our values. It's not something that hangs on the wall. And this is why, we have 5 core values. This is why we do them. And do you resonate still with this? Yeah, I hope that you do. How are you doing on each one of those? Here are the expectations of that. Here, and it's all those stories that we tell. And a lot of times we don't do that. Here's what great looks like. A lot of times we tell you what sucky looks like, right? And then we confront the person. But what does great look like? How do I get you there? And not to toot my own horn, but I think you and I have had a lot of those discussions. Not just from my side, but you've asked, right? What does it look like if I'm going to be great in this area? And it doesn't come out in that. You haven't said, how do I look great? And it hasn't been that, but how do I do a great job here? It sounds like that. But having those discussions and having them often, checking in, giving people what they need. I think people think about onboarding as, and maybe millennials won't understand it, but most of the people that are watching this will understand it. You probably won't even understand it because you probably never seen him. But as Ron Popeil, set it and forget it. You have no idea what I'm talking about, but most of the people on this webinar do. That is not onboarding. You do not set it and forget it. You put effort into it. You go over the expectations again and again and again. You reinforce and reward the behavior that you want, not all the time punitive against the behavior that you don't want. If you want a good book too, this is just a side note. I just started reading a book. It's called Chief Joy Officer. And it's good. It's about having fun in the work environment. How do we bring joy and actually love, dare I say it, into the work environment instead of just fear and external manipulation with people. And I think that's what really, when we say the younger generation looking for, they're looking to, how do I impact, right? How do I impact people? How can I impact my environment? How can I impact? And I think those are all good things. And I know this gentleman that I was talking to, sharing the true story before, that he's actually struggling more with his boomers than he is his millennials. He's having the opposite problem. But when I look at what he's doing, he's a little bit closer to the millennials, but he likes to have fun. He believes in his people. He believes in the development. And I'm trying to get him more towards, hey, look, the things that you're doing for them, the younger, probably need to do for that, that more mature population. But that's a big thing, is really understanding that why. And the second question there, the aspects, and again, if you have questions, you can write them in there. Now, what are the aspects to promote when recruiting millennials? Right, always the behavior.
Yep.
I cannot stress enough the job posting. Get your job posting right. You don't have to have, and this is one of the things that you questioned, Zach, when we first started having the dialogue about coming on board, is like, well, can I do it? Hire for drive, teach for skill.
Mm-hmm.
I was sure that you could do it if you put the effort in, because you are wired correctly. And I knew I was pretty confident that at least 85 to 90% of the time I could give you what you need.
Yeah.
When that happens, the skill can be taught. When I'm not in the right role and I'm not getting what I need and I don't fit in the culture, it doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to have those in place. So when you're looking in the recruitment of millennials, use that job posting, use the right, I call it just the right bait. And then when they come in, know who you're talking to. Those of you that are really good at interviewing, I have a couple HR folks that we work with that are phenomenal at interviewing. But what I've noticed about all of them, and they're all wired differently, is they change their impact and their questioning in regards to who they're interviewing. So they use the PI in that manner to even to lay out the job offer. Like if you had somebody like you, this is what I did with you, is let's take a look at the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have somebody that's extremely risk averse, make sure you talk about the consistency. Don't say that, hey, look, we're just starting out. I'm not sure if I'm either going to make payroll, right? Yeah, that's probably not a good something to say if you want somebody that's very risk averse. But if the sky's the limit to you, that speaks to you, doesn't speak to everybody. So you have to, when you're looking at people, because we have I've had a lot of emails the past few weeks about just people setting up interviews and people just ghosting them. They don't even show up. They don't even tell them, because there's the job market's so wide open. Speak to that person when you get them on the phone. And the other thing I would say here is I've started to track for some of our clients the time when they actually get a resume to actually when that person is called. And I guess just being frank, it's abysmal. I mean, it's horrible. Like if you get it and somebody is interested, get on the phone, send them an email, get in front of them, because everybody else is going after them too. And a lot of times we're just losing the opportunity. The good recruiters that I've seen out there, when that comes in, they're looking at it against the job assessment and saying, hey, look, do they fit or not? If they do, hey, look, let's get them on the line. Let's bring them in and make that quicker, right? And people can't just sit around and wait. I mean, if I asked you to wait a month and a half before I made a decision, I don't think you'd be here, would you? I mean,
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, and I would just say, reach out to us if you need help with your job posting. We've been doing this for a while now. We know how to tailor that job posting to really attract the kind of candidates that you want. So reach out to your consultants, reach out to us. We'd be glad and happy to help you with that job posting.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question, and then we'll run it over, and then we'll stop for today. The good question was asked about. This is specific to Child Protective Services, but I think it can be applicable to a lot of job places where it takes a while to get really good at a position. Right. In this particular question, average of 2 years to get good at the job. Our millennials seem to leave the position way quicker than our 40 to 50-year-olds. They will say it's too much to learn, or they don't feel successful after only 3 months. And again, thank you for this question, because I think it's applicable to not just CPS, but all work environments. This goes back to how you're keeping them motivated, but it also goes back to the why. One of the things that is that they're actually a client of ours, but they help create stories inside of a company as well, and they help companies tell their external story and their internal story, and they've been absolutely wonderful. But what they've helped us do with some of our clients is tell the internal story. What are the success stories? What do we need to be celebrating? So we don't just continue to hear all the negative stuff. I think everybody, at least most everybody, wants to be really good at their job. It doesn't matter how they're wired. I mean, If I take you and I take Morgan, who are my two millennials, and I say, well, yeah, you're two wired completely different because you are, right? Um, you want to know how you contribute to the greater whole. And when we have discussions like that, it's very helpful. And I know because, and one of the reasons I wanted to take this question is because that's where I cut my teeth. I mean, I'm a licensed therapist, social work. That's how I got into all this. And one of the things that I saw was when you take people and you spend time with them and tell them the why, because people don't get into CPS and teaching and counseling and all that for the money. They get into it for the impact. When they don't know how to be impactful, right, then they leave. They go find someplace else where they might find it. And what I found, especially through all my education, was, maybe it was good book teaching, but especially for, social work and things like that, there wasn't a lot of hands-on. And when I got it, I think for me, I just wanted to learn and get better at it. So I pushed myself. But there's a lot of that in and out because they don't feel part of. When people feel part of a team, it doesn't matter their age. I've worked with some teams that have been anywhere from 80 down to their teens. And it's just incredible when we can start sharing that knowledge and start telling the stories of this is how it contributes to the whole, right? And shared some of those stories with you when you first came on, because I've been doing this for, well, it's crazy to think about, but I've been doing this for almost as long as you and Morgan have been alive, believe it or not. I mean, this has been what I do. So really sharing, this is what good looks like. This is what I want it to look like, but also saying, hey, look, you're going to make mistakes. And when you make a mistake, it's okay. I've made it. I don't want you to make it as many times as I did, but here's some pitfalls of that. But have the conversation. And I would say, these have been great questions. Hopefully this has been helpful. We could probably spend the next 3 hours on it. With that in mind, especially if you're a client and would like this workshop, there's a tune-up for you with one of our consultants. We can come in and do a 2-hour tune-up with any of our clients. And if you're interested and you're not a client, you're listening to this, we'd be happy to come in and workshop it as well. It might take a little bit longer because we'll have to run some analytics and things. But for those of you that are clients, this is easy to come in because we can grab the analytics for you. We can workshop it. We can do a lunch and learn. We can do a morning breakfast, whatever it needs to be. But let's continue this conversation because it's a big topic. I think probably next month, what we'll do, Zach, just spitballing here like you and I do, is we'll go over that onboarding checklist and actually have that programmatically set out for people in slides and talk about each one of those, because I think that would be helpful as best practice as people continue to do this and make people a priority. Any last words, tips?
Yeah, I mean, the millennials are the future workplace. And people that are eventually going to take your job. So if you love what you do, you love your company. As a millennial, I'm speaking for millennials, we want to have impact. We want to be able to live for something much greater than ourselves. And if you can find your why inside your company, I think you're really going to have an advantage moving forward the next 5 to 10 years, attracting millennials who eventually will be taking over those leadership positions. So don't get discouraged with millennials. We really do want to have impact and make a difference in this world. So thank you guys so much for staying tuned today.
Yeah, and I would say too, what I've learned with anybody that's different from me is they make me better. And it could be frustrating and it could be a headache, but it makes me a better person as a leader and as a manager. And if you could shift your mindset, your paradigm around that, you're a pain in the rear end sometimes, but most of the time you're not. And when I put that effort in, you actually teach me how to be better, how to be a better leader. And I hope you get that impact. But then the last thing I would say to everybody watching and listening is if you don't get this right, there are companies that will get it right. And those are the ones that are going to take the top talent. If you want to have a competitive advantage, in your work environment, especially with your competition. Do this, do it well, do it all the time. Train your millennials, put that effort into them. I know we do a lot of workshops, especially the managing to perform in our half-day workshop with millennials, and it's taken so well, and just love that a company would be putting this much effort into their development personally and professionally, and they stay longer. So with that said, here's some of the upcoming events that we have. Our next webinar, Mastering Communication, that will be with our consultant, Rhea Stevens. We have a training January 14th and 15th that's open to the public, a couple closed trainings, and then our open trainings again. We'll have one in Memphis and in Cranberry Township, just outside of Pittsburgh. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the website or feel free to just call us. But with that, have a great day. Have a great week. If you continue to have questions regarding this, we'll be happy to jump on, answer those for you, and continue with the webinars. So thanks for that. Have a great day. Have a great week. Have a great start to 2020, and we'll see y'all soon.